Next, performing conditional tests. The simplest type of conditional is an if statement, and the simplest type of an if statement is one with only a single option. So in that approach, you say if, and in parentheses, you supply a Boolean expression. A Boolean expression is one whose values can only be true or false. So for example, it wouldn't be legal to put just a number or a string inside the parentheses. If the Boolean expression of value is to true, it does all the statements. If the Boolean expression of value is to false, it skips all the statements. A widely accepted best practice is to pretend that those curly braces are required. Technically, they're not. If you only have a single statement, you can omit the curly braces, but doing so makes your code very difficult to maintain. Someone comes along and adds a second statement later, doesn't notice that the curly braces are missing, and the second statement is now no longer part of the if statement. So act as though an if requires the curly braces. So the single option is the simplest, but quite common is a double option, where you say if, you supply a Boolean expression, something that can be true or false. And then if it's true, it does the statements at the top. If it's false, it does the statements inside the else at the bottom. Then, of course, you might have multiple options. So then you have nested if then else statements. If this one is true, do the first set. Else if the second one is true, do the second set of statements. Else if the third one is true, do the third set of statements. Otherwise, and else with no if, do the last set of statements. Java also has switch statements, which are like compact if-then-else statements comparing against a specific value. So you supply a value that you want to test. In this case, month here is a number. If the number is equal to 1, it does the first thing. If the number is equal to 2, it does the second thing. If the number is equal to 3, do the third thing, and so forth. So it's like an if-then-else, it's just more compact. The only tricky part is that if you find a match, it doesn't stop comparing automatically. You have to put a break at the end. And this is a holdover from the way that switch statements worked in C and C++. Java also has a number of Boolean operators, operators that work on true and false values. Equals equals if two things are the same. Exclamation equals if two things are not the same. So read that as not equals. For numbers, you can do less than or equals, greater than equals, and so forth. Double ampersand means and. If this is true and the next thing is true. Double vertical bars means or. If this is true or the other thing is true. And it's very important to note that in Java, just as in other C-like languages, both of these do short-circuit evaluation. So if you test an and, if blah is true and something else is true, if blah is false, it'll never check the other thing. Because if the first one is false, the and cannot possibly be true, so it just stops checking and returns false right away. Or also does short-circuit evaluation. If you say if blah or something else, if blah is true, it stops checking, because if one branch of an or is true, the whole thing is true, and it always checks left to right. So it does left to right short-circuit evaluation. And then finally, the exclamation point means not. Say if A, where A is Boolean, it does one thing. If you say if exclamation point A, if not A, then it does the opposite. Okay, so here's an example of if statements and conditionals in action. Here's a method for which you pass two numbers, and it returns the bigger of the two numbers. So if you pass in a 5 and a 6, it returns a 6. If you pass in a 6 and a 5, it returns a 6.